The Grand Conference Hall in Geneva was a masterpiece of diplomacy. Ornate chandeliers, walls lined with historical paintings, and a long mahogany table stretching across the room. The table was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the tense expressions of those seated around it. At one end sat Donald J. Trump, his trademark red tie draped neatly over his suit, his hands folded casually as if this were just another business deal. Across from him sat Volodymyr Zelensky, his military-style olive-green sweater a stark contrast to the formality of the room. Though his posture was composed, his sharp blue eyes held an unmistakable fire. Cameras had flashed just minutes ago when the two leaders had shaken hands for the press. The pictures would show smiles, firm grips, and the illusion of unity. But now, with no cameras in sight, the real conversation was about to begin. Trump leaned back in his chair, flashing a broad grin. "Volodymyr, I gotta say, you're a fighter. I like that about you. Tough guy. Very tough. And listen, I love Ukraine. Beautiful place, beautiful people. Some of the best people, believe me." Zelensky gave a small nod, his face neutral. "We appreciate America's support." Trump waved a hand. Of course, of course. You know, if I were in office, none of this would have happened. Putin. He never would have tried this under me. He knows better. He respects me. That's the truth." Zelensky stiffened slightly at the mention of Vladimir Putin, but he said nothing. Trump continued, "But hey, we are where we are, right? So let's fix it. Let's end this war. I know how to do it. The best way. A tremendous deal." Zelensky slowly exhaled, choosing his words carefully. "I am always open to peace, Mr. President. But not at the expense of our sovereignty." Trump grinned, tapping his fingers on the table. "That's what I like about you, principled guy. Very strong. But let me ask you something. How long are you gonna do this?" He gestured vaguely in the air. "The war, the fighting. Great effort, great effort. But let's be honest, it's not sustainable. You're bleeding money. You're bleeding soldiers. And let me tell you, America won't keep sending you blank checks forever." Zelensky's jaw tightened, but his expression didn't change. "We will fight as long as necessary. We do not give up our land." Trump sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "See, that's the thing, Volodymyr. Smart people know when to walk away with a win. And that's what I'm offering you." He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly, as if sharing an exclusive deal. "I talked to Putin. Very good talk. He respects me, okay? He told me, 'Donald, I want peace.' Now, do I believe everything he says? Not always. But I know how to negotiate. I tell Vlad, 'Let's wrap this up.' We sign a deal. Maybe some borders shift, just a little, nothing crazy. Maybe you give up a few things, but in return, no more war. No more missiles. No more dead soldiers." Zelensky's fingers clenched the armrest of his chair. "Ukraine does not negotiate with invaders." Trump raised an eyebrow. "That's what everyone says at first. But let's be real. You think NATO is going to keep writing checks forever? You think Europe isn't getting tired? What happens when the money stops? What happens when the weapons slow down? What then?" Zelensky met Trump's gaze without blinking. "Then we fight with what we have. We fought with nothing before, and we will do it again." Trump scoffed. "Bad strategy. The worst. Trust me. I know how this works. I make deals, the best deals. And this is the best deal you're gonna get. You walk away now, you get to be the hero. The man who ended the war." Zelensky shook his head slowly. "There is no peace if Ukraine is divided. We have lost too much to walk away now." Trump sighed, louder this time, as if explaining something obvious to a stubborn business partner. "Look, Volodymyr. I get it. You're a patriot. You love your country. Beautiful. But sometimes, you gotta cut your losses. You keep fighting. More dead soldiers. More civilians lost. And America." He wagged a finger. "America isn't gonna fund this forever. Mark my words." For the first time, a flicker of frustration crossed Zelensky's face. He sat forward. America has been our most important ally. Your words matter, Mr. President. When you say things like this, you encourage Russia. You give them hope that the West will abandon us. Trump shrugged, as if the thought hadn't occurred to him. I'm just being honest. If I get back in office, I'm fixing this mess. No more money flowing out like a leaky faucet. We'll spend it right here at home, where it belongs. So I'm telling you, take this deal. Or risk losing everything. Zelensky exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. He had anticipated pressure, but not this bluntness. He had faced Putin, missiles, and sieges, but Trump was something else entirely. This was only the beginning. And already, the battle was starting to shift from diplomatic to personal. The conference room in Geneva remained still, but the air had changed. What had started as a seemingly friendly negotiation was beginning to unravel into something sharper, more aggressive. Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, an amused smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Across from him, Volodymyr Zelensky sat upright, his face carefully composed, but there was a tension in his eyes now, a recognition that this conversation was shifting. Trump tapped his fingers on the table rhythmically, watching Zelensky like a businessman waiting for an investor to realize they were out of options. Then, he leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to seem like he was letting Zelensky in on a secret. You know, Volodymyr, I've been thinking. America's sent billions to Ukraine. Billions. More than most countries' entire GDPs. And yet, somehow, this war keeps dragging on. It's crazy, don't you think? Zelensky's eyes narrowed. We are fighting for survival. Every dollar has gone toward defending Ukraine. Trump chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, come on. Every dollar? You sure about that? He pulled out a small stack of papers and tapped them on the table. Because what I see here, well, it doesn't look so clean, my friend. Zelensky's jaw tensed. What are you implying? Trump sighed dramatically, flipping through the papers. You know, people talk. And I get calls. Big calls. People in Congress, military guys, finance people. And they all ask me the same thing. Where's the money going? Because, let's be real, some of it's just missing. Poof. Gone. Zelensky took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He had heard these accusations before. Corruption was an easy weapon to use against Ukraine. But from Trump, it carried a different kind of weight. Ukraine has been transparent. We report to our partners. Every dollar is accounted for. Trump smirked, tilting his head. Sure. That's what all the reports say. But let's take a little walk down memory lane, shall we? He tapped the papers again. Remember that one guy? What's his name? Kolomoisky. Big oligarch, very rich. Helped you get elected. And what happened to him? Zelensky's face darkened. He was arrested. Exactly. Trump pointed at him, as if he had just won a game. And why was he arrested? Corruption. Laundering. Shady dealings. And yet, Trump spread his hands wide, he was one of your biggest backers. Now, I'm not saying you had anything to do with it, but let's be honest, Volodymyr. The money doesn't always go where it's supposed to. Zelensky's patience was running thin. His voice came out sharper than before. Ukraine is at war. We have no time for corruption. Trump grinned, sensing the shift. Oh, I love that. No time for corruption. Great line, really. But let's talk about some other things that America has sent you. He reached into a folder and pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. Zelensky barely glanced at it before his expression hardened. It was a satellite image, rows of brand-new luxury cars parked outside a mansion in Cyprus. Trump tapped the photo. You see this? This is where some of your officials are living. Brand-new cars. Big houses. While your soldiers are dying. Now tell me, how does that look? Zelensky clenched his jaw. We are investigating these cases. Any official misusing funds will be punished. Trump laughed, shaking his head. Punished? By who? You. He spread his arms wide. Look, I don't blame you. I really don't. War is expensive. Governments are messy. I get it. But here's the deal, Americans. They're not gonna like this. When I get back in office, do you really think I'm gonna let Congress keep sending money if it's just vanishing into Swiss bank accounts? Zelensky's temper was slipping. You are painting a false picture. Our soldiers are fighting with everything they have. Trump cut him off. Yeah, and I respect that. But let me ask you something, Volodymyr. Where's the peace deal? Because I don't see one. Zelensky inhaled sharply, his voice like steel. There is no peace deal because Russia does not want peace. They want all of Ukraine. Trump leaned forward, his smile fading. Then maybe, just maybe, it's time to give them something. The words hung in the air. Zelensky stared at him, his hands gripping the table. We will not surrender our land. Trump shrugged. It's not surrender. It's business. You've got rare earth metals, don't you? Zelensky's stomach twisted. He didn't like where this was going. Trump grinned again. Nickel, titanium, lithium, all the good stuff. And guess who wants it? China, Russia, even us. Now, what if we work out a deal? You keep some land, Russia gets some land, and we all get a cut of the pie. Sounds fair, doesn't it? Zelensky's eyes burned. You are talking about selling my country's resources in exchange for survival? Trump snapped his fingers. Now you're getting it. See? This is why I do the best deals. Everybody wins. Zelensky leaned forward, his voice ice-cold. Except the Ukrainian people. Trump waved a hand. They'll live. And they'll live better when they're not getting bombed every day. Zelensky pushed his chair back. His pulse was racing. Trump smirked, sensing the anger. Come on, Volodymyr. Think big. You could be the greatest Ukrainian leader ever. The man who ended the war. Or, you could be the guy who let it drag on until Ukraine was a pile of rubble. Your choice. The two men locked eyes. The friendly tone from before? Gone. The fight had truly begun. The temperature in the conference room had dropped. What started as diplomatic negotiations had turned into something uglier, sharper. Donald Trump sat with his arms crossed, his once friendly grin replaced with something colder. Across from him, Volodymyr Zelensky was tense, his fists clenched beneath the table. The calm mask he had worn at the start of the meeting was slipping. Trump tapped his fingers on the polished wood. Slow. Deliberate. So let's be real here, Volodymyr. His voice was still casual, but there was an edge to it now. This whole thing, it's not working. You're bleeding money, you're bleeding soldiers, and worst of all, you're bleeding support. Zelensky's eyes narrowed. Ukraine has the support of its allies. Trump snorted, shaking his head. For now. But come on, you see the numbers. Weapons shipments slowing down. Public opinion shifting. Even the Europeans are getting cold feet. You can't fight a war without money. And when I get back in office... He leaned forward. I'm cutting the faucet off. No more blank checks. Zelensky stiffened, his voice laced with warning. If America stops supporting Ukraine, Russia will not stop at our borders. You know that. Trump shrugged. Not my problem. I'm about America first. The words hung between them. Zelensky inhaled, forcing himself to stay composed. The world cannot afford a Russian victory. Trump grinned. The world can't afford another endless war. That's the difference. People back home, they're tired of this. They see the money we send, and they say, hey, maybe it's time to take care of our own country instead of propping up another one. Asterisk asterisk. Zelensky's knuckles turned white. You speak of American aid as if it is charity. It is an investment in global security. Trump laughed, leaning back in his chair. Oh, that's good. Global security. Great line. You should go into marketing. Zelensky didn't flinch. You say you are a businessman. Then you must understand, if Ukraine falls, Europe falls. And that is bad business. Trump shrugged. Depends on who's making the deals. Zelensky frowned. What does that mean? Trump sighed, shaking his head like he was explaining something painfully obvious. Look, I already said it. Your country's sitting on a gold mine. Rare earth metals. He held up a hand, ticking them off one by one. Nickel, titanium, lithium, the stuff that everyone wants. You could be making trillions. But instead, you're too busy blowing up tanks. Zelensky's face hardened. We do not fight for profit. We fight for survival. Trump smirked. Survival? Or stupidity? You could make a deal. You give Russia some land, you cut in America and Europe on the resources, and boom, everybody wins. Zelensky's hands clenched the armrests of his chair. And what happens when Russia takes more? Do we keep giving them our land? Trump shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. But at least you'd still have a country. Keep going like this. And soon you won't. A heavy silence filled the room. Zelensky leaned forward now, his eyes cold. Tell me, Mr. President, what is the price of your own country's land? Would you give away Texas if someone threatened you? Trump's grin faltered for just a second. Zelensky pressed on. Would you negotiate away Florida? Maybe parts of New York? No. Then why do you expect me to do it? Trump exhaled loudly, rubbing his forehead. You just don't get it, do you? Zelensky's voice was low, controlled. No. I don't think you do. Trump slapped his palm on the table, making the aides at the far end jump. Listen, I'm trying to help you. You don't like my deal? Fine. But without me, you have nothing. No money. No weapons. No future. Zelensky's voice came out like ice. Then we will fight with our bare hands if we must. Because surrender is not an option. Trump leaned forward, his smile gone. Then you're a fool. Zelensky didn't move. Didn't blink. And you are a man who does not understand war. Another silence. Trump stood up abruptly, buttoning his jacket. All right. Have it your way. But let me tell you something, Volodymyr. You're gonna wish you listened to me when the money runs out. When your soldiers have nothing left. When the West moves on to the next crisis. Because guess what? He pointed a finger at Zelensky. America doesn't do forever wars anymore. Zelensky slowly rose from his chair. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was firm. Russia thought Ukraine would last 3 days. It has been 3 years. If we must fight alone, then we will. But we will never surrender. Trump chuckled, shaking his head. Bad strategy. The worst. The door slammed behind him as he left. Zelensky stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty chair across from him. His heart was pounding. This was not diplomacy anymore. This was a warning. And the fight for Ukraine's survival had just gotten even harder. The tension in the room was unbearable. 4 hours, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky had been locked in this battle, words turning to weapons, diplomacy giving way to thinly veiled threats. Now, the last shred of politeness had burned away. Trump leaned forward, his face red, his patience long gone. Let me tell you something, Volodymyr. You're making a huge mistake. The biggest mistake. Zelensky, sitting rigid in his chair, stared him down. No, Mr. President. You are the one who does not understand what is happening here. Trump slammed his fist on the table, making the aides around them flinch. What's there to understand? I came here to help you, and instead, you sit there, acting like you're some kind of war hero while your country is falling apart. Zelensky's face was like stone. We do not need deals that cost us our land, our sovereignty. We need support. We need weapons. We need the world to stand against Russia, not tell us to surrender. Trump let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. Support? Weapons? Are you serious? Do you have any idea how much money we've sent you? Do you even know where half of it went? Because let me tell you, nobody does. Zelensky's fists tightened. Ukraine is not perfect, but we have used everything to fight for our survival. Trump scoffed, eyes burning. Oh yeah. Then explain why your officials are buying mansions in Switzerland while your soldiers are fighting in trenches. Explain why billions of dollars just disappear. You think I don't know corruption when I see it? Zelensky's temper finally cracked. Do not talk to me about corruption when your own people are under investigation every day. Trump's face twisted in rage. Excuse me. Zelensky stood up sharply, his chair scraping against the floor. Do not stand here and lecture me about corruption while your own businesses, your own deals, your own politicians are drowning in it. Do not insult Ukraine's sacrifices. Trump's jaw tightened, his body rigid with anger. You know what? Forget it. You want to keep playing the tough guy? Fine. But when I'm back in office, it's over. No more money. No more weapons. You're on your own. Zelensky stepped forward, his voice razor-sharp. Then we will fight without you. Trump threw up his hands. Yeah. And how long is that gonna last? You think you can hold off Russia with nothing? With sticks and stones? Zelensky's voice was cold as steel. We held them off when the world thought we had 3 days. And we will hold them off again. Trump gritted his teeth, shaking his head. You are so damn stubborn. I'm giving you a way out. Zelensky's gaze was unwavering. You are giving me a way to lose. A long, dangerous silence. Then, Trump snapped. You know what? Screw this. This is a waste of my time. I don't deal with people who don't know a good thing when it's in front of them. He grabbed his papers, shoving them into a folder. His face was a mask of fury. You'll regret this, he growled. When you're out of weapons, when you're out of soldiers, when your country is nothing but rubble, don't come crying to me. Zelensky's eyes didn't waver. We will never beg. Trump let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, you will. And when that day comes, I won't pick up the phone. With that, he turned sharply and stormed toward the door. The room was silent, everyone holding their breath as the former U.S. president ripped open the door and marched out. The door slammed shut, rattling the walls. Zelensky stood there, listening to Trump's footsteps fade away down the corridor. Then, he let out a slow breath. Nothing had changed. Ukraine was still alone. And the war was far from over.